Shlanja, and welcome to the Auld Dubliner, my favorite pub in Long Beach, California. Everything in this pub, by the way, is from Ireland, a country that I've been to 15 times. Now, you might wonder, well, first let me drink. I'm going to keep doing that through the show. You should too. You'll really enjoy the trip a lot more. Now, I've been about 15 times, and each time I've gone, I've taken some great video that I want to share with you today. Ireland has been all over the news recently, but of course, one of the biggest reasons was it is the first country to vote same-sex marriage in by a popular vote. Their Supreme Court didn't do it, their legislature didn't do it, the people of Ireland did it. Now, this was a big shock to many because Ireland is seen as a Catholic country. But I will tell you, as an openly gay man, I have never experienced any homophobia in Ireland at all, except from an American who was from Nashville, Tennessee. But that's a whole different story.
Is it right or left or Gibraltar? Went back to a take for Mission Head. I'd love to sail down their Bantry Harbour. St. Brendan to his albatross, he said. The entire population came, the place was chock-a-block. No love nor money wouldn't get your nose inside the shop. The fishermen hauled up their nets, the farmers met their money. They carried people, the load of saints, the
Ireland's a country of about 4.5 million people in the North Atlantic. It has a very long and very rich history, like pubs. In fact, did you know that pub stands for public house? It came from the Romans, from taverna, and up until the 1970s, the windows in a pub used to be tinted for discretion, so people didn't see you inside. I guess after the 70s, nobody cared. On my first trip, I was lucky enough to take the Wild Atlantic Way. Now, this is the longest continuous road in the Atlantic. It goes all the way from Shannon, all the way down and around, and ends up in Cork. Now, the beauty of Ireland is literally the beauty. You can be driving along a road, a little country road, and round a corner, and suddenly nature just smacks you in the face. Take this. This is the harbor here at Westport. There's little islands out there that you can go to. And of course, this is a little flatlands area here. It is on the way to Crowpatrick. And over here, we have this idyllic bunch of sheep just being sheep. And when you look at this, you just think to yourself, wow. I mean, and look, those people get to live here. Look at those houses over there on the hills. I mean, this is their front yard. This is where they live. There are places you can go in Ireland where it's still completely silent and completely alone. And for those of us that live in California, we know that, of course, is very, 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 very rare. And it's so peaceful if we just take a moment and listen. Shh. That's the sound of nothing. That's what nothing sounds like. Are you ready? Here we go again. Shh. Nothing. Spectacular. The sound of silence. Hello, Simon and Garfunkel, huh? I bet that water is freaking gold. Now, a pub will have, of course, many good Irish whiskies. Mine, whiskey of choice, is Jameson's. And if you're in Ireland, do go to a pub, although there's a big movement over there right now to sort of not focus on the drinking, and focus more on the culture and the food. That's right, the food. Ireland has become a very big food destination. But if you're lucky enough to find yourself in a pub in Portmagee on a Wednesday night when no one else is in the city, and the pub owner takes a liking to you, he might call his friends and do a private show for you, just like they did for us. Take a look at what we got to see privately in Portmagee. Sláinte.
So, this is a sea shanty, and it's called South Australia. And so if you're joining the course, it's very simple. You'll pick it up very quickly. So here we go. In South Australia I was born. Heave away, haul away. South Australia by Cape Horn. We're bound for South Australia. Haul away, rolling kings. Heave away, haul away. Haul away, oh hear me sing. We're bound for South Australia. As I went out one morning fair. Heave away, haul away. Just there I met Miss Nancy Blair. We're bound for South Australia. Haul away, rolling kings. Heave away, haul away. Haul away, oh hear me sing.
We're bound for South Australia.
I shook her up, I shook her down.
Heave away, haul away.
I shook her round about the town.
We're bound for South Australia.
All away in rolling kings.
Heave away, haul away.
All away, you'll hear me sing.
We're bound for South Australia.
There's just one thing that grieves me mind.
Heave away, haul away.
That's to leave Miss Nancy Blair behind.
We're bound for South Australia.
All away in rolling kings.
Heave away, haul away.
All away, you'll hear me sing.
We're bound for South Australia.
As we go down around Cape Horn.
Heave away, haul away.
You wish to God you'd never been born.
We're bound for South Australia.
All away in rolling kings.
Heave away, haul away.
All away, you'll hear me sing.
We're bound for South Australia.
In South Australia I was born.
Heave away, haul away.
South Australia by Cape Horn.
We're bound for South Australia.
All away in rolling kings.
Heave away, haul away.
All away, you'll hear me sing.
We're bound for South Australia. We still rolling? Let's do more of these. Waitress. Wait, hold on. Okay, interesting point. Millions of people show up in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day, but guess what? The first St. Patrick's celebrations were not in Ireland. Nay. They were in Boston. It became so popular that the tradition actually spread to Ireland. So St. Patrick's Day and St. Patrick's Day parades are a big, big event over in America, so much so that now they've spread over to Ireland, and the entire country goes crazy on St. Patrick's Day. I have led the St. Patrick's Day parade in Dublin 4 times on top of a double-decker bus. It's an experience not to be missed. Right before I did it, I got to talk with sensation George Hook. He's a presenter over there who is like no other. In his 50s, he was bankrupt, his wife was about to leave him, and he didn't have a job. Then, as fate would have it, a hurricane stepped in, and now he's the biggest presenter in Ireland. We caught up with him at the Beacon Hotel in Dublin. Here's what he had to say. You know how I love to come to Ireland. Well, when I was preparing to come this year, I started reading the Irish Times, and I started, looking about for stories. I saw a story about a gentleman named George Hook, and the headline said that he was determined to take out his competition in afternoon drive radio, which I know something about. But more importantly, it was a story about reinvention. And as you all know, I was doing radio 7 days a week for 3 years and been in radio 25 years, but always was supposed to be in television and film. And so, as you all know, I've cut my Monday through Friday down to an hour, and now I'm dedicating a lot of time to television and film, and it's going well in that direction, but I had to take the time to do it. It's terrifying to be 51 years old and starting down a path that you've only been on a little. And just basically reinventing yourself. So when I read the story, it resonated with me. Then I gave a listen to him, and I said, oh, I've got to talk to him. His name is George Hook. I didn't know how wildly popular and somewhat controversial he is. Now, we're going to ask him his history because he's right here, but it's quite a past. Born in Cork, correct?
Yeah, Cork is below the Mason-Dixon line in Ireland, second city, and it has that second city syndrome, where all us Corkonians have a chip on our shoulder. But
well, first of all, you're called Corkonians.
Yeah, and I would have left Cork straight from school to come to college in Dublin, like so many of my friends. And then it's interesting, I just made a complete disaster of my life. If you spend 30-odd years in business and you're an abysmal failure, and every bank licensed to trade in the country sues you on the same day, the mortgage company want to evict you from your house, your wife wants to, divorce you. That's tricky in Ireland, but the Irish version. And
what is that, murder?
And
I just found out the divorce just became legal 16 years ago.
oh yeah, it's very recent.
When I found that out, that's what I asked. What was the murder rate before that?
What you had to do before that's quite interesting because we're all Catholics. You had to get an annulment from Rome. Right. And the only way you could do that is by having a marriage that was non-consummated. So it was a bit of a trick to persuade the Vatican you were married 25 years, but you hadn't consummated the marriage. Anyway, then the British Customs and Excise threatened to put me in jail for non-payment of taxes. And suddenly, like, I'm 55 years of age. My wife's going to leave me. I'm facing living in a mobile home. I mean, and then I'm sitting at home. She hasn't thrown me out just yet. And it's a Friday night, and the lights are off because the utility company that I haven't paid have cut us off. Luckily, the phone is on, and I got a phone call from the television station, and they say, "Will you work tomorrow?" Now, you've been in television, you know, when the company calls you and says, "Will you work tomorrow?" They must be stuck, you know. So they were stuck. And they said, "Look, we just want you for 2 minutes. We got this rugby game, and you give us a bit of a 2-minute entree, and we're going to pay you $30. And coincidentally, I think I owed the utility company $30. So I thought,
like, okay, where do I show up?
So I thought I could get the lights back, and
Maybe she'd stay longer if you had some electricity.
So the following day, I go in for this 2-minute gig, and that morning, I was on at like 2. At about 11 a.m., a hurricane strikes Ireland, and like soccer goes down, Formula One motor racing goes down, Davis Cup tennis goes down, horse racing goes down, and all they're left with is this rugby game and me. and the floor manager comes over and he says, "George, can you talk for 4 hours?" And I said, "Can I talk for 4 hours?"
Yeah, people always ask me, how do you fill up all that? And all my friends go, "Oh, no, he can fill up the time." It sounds like your radio career is divine intervention.
Yeah, I got my first real paycheck when I was 55. Wow. And I did a few years in television. Then I got a really big break, which was radio. 12 years ago, this new station starts, and they're stuck at Drive. They've got all the slots filled with famous guys. And somebody said, "Why don't we use this guy? It's short term until we get somebody good." 12 years later, I'm the only one left. Right. All the stars are gone.
When something happens, we don't let it. The losers don't let it go. It's like the Republicans; they won't let Obamacare go. 52 votes after a law has already passed. That's just a waste of time and energy.
You see, the big difference also between us. I mean, you talk about the poor. I mean, let's face it. You don't give an SH1T about the poor in America.
No, we don't. Not at all. We want them now. Let me say this. Many people do, but as a government and as a society, no, we don't.
You see, you have this great idea. I'd be a good guy in America. I'd be a kind of poster boy because I'd be the guy who failed, and by his own sweat of his own brow and his efforts, he reached fame and fortune and wealth, right? The thing is, what we believe, and most Europeans, to be fair, believe it, that there should be a reasonable redistribution from the wealthy to the poor.
Oh, you commie bastard Jew.
Yeah. I'm your classic pinko, right?
But so am I. I mean, I get so angry. I've been poor. I mean, lived in my car poor. You know, when you talk about, I have been homeless. I have lived on nothing. I have eaten out of McDonald's dumpster. I mean, I have been poor. I know poor. I have been on what you call the dole. And when people that think that we treat the poor well in our country have never been poor.
Well, you see, the thing is, I don't think, and through all that terrible period of mine, the country would have said, we can't allow this guy sleep in his car. Right. We can't allow this guy eat out of a McDonald's dumpster. We can't allow that because that's just not right. So we will put in supports for that system. Now, I think that's right. Now, what the the Republicans in America and people of their ilk will say, no, that guy just doesn't want to work. Right. I mean, he's just lazy. And if it's a female and we give her money, she's just going to get pregnant again, and so on and so on and so on.
They want to drug test people now before they collect unemployment insurance. It's insurance that you pay for while you're working. And then if you become unemployed, well, before they give it to you, we want you to pee in a cup.
Well, you see, that's why I think our argument is different from yours. The problem for us is, and when I say us, I mean Europe. Right. The problem for us is that these benefits have grown beyond perhaps the original idea behind them. The original idea behind them was when you were unemployed, we'll give you a leg up and, keep you going until such time as you get another job. Then the economy creates unemployment. So now people are on permanent sort of unemployment. The demographic, we're getting older and older and living longer and longer. So the idea, of me getting $300 a week, which I do every single Friday, it pops into my bank account, my old age pension. But that was developed at a time when I was going to live until I was 70. Right. The great theory of 70 years and 10 was your life expectancy. Now I've got a reasonable expectancy of 85. So now the government's got to fine $300 a week for an extra 14 years that the actuaries didn't build in 50, 60 years.
Yeah, but this notion, there is this ridiculous notion. I said this when we were out in the Duloc Pass, because I felt, when I read Mahatma Gandhi's quote there on the monument about what honor is there when you know that people are, that's how I feel about our Congress. That's how I feel. The notion that there's not enough money in the world to take care of the people who need it is ridiculous. There's tons of money in the U.S. to take care of the poor. There's tons of money in the EU to take care of the poor. Then we just want to spend it on other things. And then we'd never turn to corporations and look to those billions of dollars and say, we need some back to help people.
Well, you see, there is a view about taxation. And we have a real problem in this country. Apple, on profits of 17 billion, paid 300 million in tax in this country. So one has to say, I was in Denver in the football stadium when Obama spoke at the Democrat conference, and he talked about sort of his version of Bush's axis of evil. For him, it was an economic axis. And he talked about Bermuda and Netherlands and Ireland. I think, yes, we are, by our tax system, encouraging American and other international companies to come here, which is great, because it's given unemployment and all this sort of thing. But I think we have a world responsibility. I think we have a responsibility to say, you work in this, you have a company in this country, you can't export the profits to some imaginary office in Bermuda and thereby avoid tax. You see, that makes me the kind of liberal tax and spend guy that the Bush family basically wants to exterminate from the
George Bush would wipe me out. I believe corporations should pull much more. In our country, they need to pay more taxes, and not GE walked away on $4 billion in taxes, and President Obama appointed the head of GE, the head of his Jobs Commission, at the same time it came out that he walked away from $4 billion in taxes. No, go get the $4 billion. And we need to make college free and charge corporations taxes to pay for the education, because they're going to benefit from the educated people. There's a lot of things that we could do, but we have this notion in our country that if you make it, you're entitled to it, as much as you can make. If you whatever the ceiling is, you can make it. What we never think about is people aren't making that through hard work. 60% of the 1% income in our country is capital gains, which comes from selling real estate and stocks. That's taxed completely different than than your paycheck that you get. They don't pay very much tax on the capital gains, and that's a majority of their income.
But it's still a great country. I'll be in San Francisco at the end of this month and beginning of April. I coach the American national rugby team. I adore it. Well, I used not to like Americans, and then I discovered 50% of them were women, and that changed my mind.
What does Ingrid think about that?
think
you're very Howard Stern in your Ingrid relationship, and you know Howard, of course. Because his wife was furious about what he would talk about on the. I have no filter. I'll just say anything that's going on in my life, and you do the same thing with your wife, and I understand she's not always happy that you're pouring it all out there for everybody.
Well, Ingrid just doesn't listen. That's her antidote. And I'm on television tomorrow for the rugby, and she won't watch. But she gets upset at me spilling it all out there, because when somebody then tells her what I've said, she gets all upset. You see, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't gamble, so I think I'm entitled to one vice, which is women.
Well, I have that philosophy about men, but I don't seem to be very good at it. I wonder if I'm gay sometimes.
I was great at it in America, because American women are extraordinary. They adore accents.
They do.
So you come to America and you speak with this funny accent, and they love you for it.
When you look back, what do you think now that you're here? What was your greatest accomplishment along the way? What do you think?
My greatest accomplishment, and next Tuesday I'm going to be talking to my old school, and this is year 10. I talk to the final year students every year, and I talk to them about how you make it in life. I think I never gave up. I mean, I never actually drew the dole when I was out of work. I always found something. My greatest accomplishment in life was when the television station asked me to do 2 minutes. I prepared as if it was the greatest 2 minutes of my life. And what I say to kids, and I think America particularly, but everybody's doing it, we are now rewarding average instead of rewarding.
And bad behavior. We edify bad behavior in our country now like no one's business. That pisses me off.
Instead of rewarding excellence. Yeah. And what I believe passionately is that if you do your absolute best for every task, however unimportant, then you got a chance of making it. Let me finally say to you, when she was going to throw me out, we went to this doctor, right? Because she was going to give me another chance. And he said to her, look, Ingrid, what are you going to do with this guy? And she said, I don't believe a word he says. He has no commitment to this marriage. So we said, all right, Ingrid, what do you want? So she said, if he fills and empties the dishwasher every day, I'll believe he's committed to this dishwasher. You are looking at the most committed dishwasher emptier in history.
Well, a dishwasher saved his marriage. George, thank you for taking the time after your show. You did your show this afternoon. Tomorrow, and by the way, I go, Mr. George Hook will be coming. I'm going to interview. And you should have seen her face. She about cracked. And then she goes, oh, he's doing the rugby tomorrow. And I said, yes, I do know that. So you've built quite a reputation for yourself, and it's been on a lot of hard work. I have listened to you. I've tuned in. You're very well prepared, and you've put a lot of hard work in, and now it's paying off for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am Karel. We'll be back after this. I get to drink for every segment? Now, here's some travel advice. When you go to Ireland, and you should, don't just go to Dublin. That would be like going to Hawaii and never leaving Honolulu. Bad idea. Go to Dublin and then go someplace else. The west of Ireland is completely different than the east, than Dublin, where Dublin is metropolitan, sort of like New York or San Francisco in the North Atlantic. The West is very, very rural. That doesn't mean stupid, that doesn't mean dumb, that doesn't mean backwoods. It just means beautiful. When you travel out west, you can just travel around a corner and have so much beauty. But also, there's a lot of tragedy. A lot of you have heard about the potato famine in Ireland and what it did to the Irish people. But when you're there, you really feel what it did. There's a pass called the Dulac Pass. Now, this pass is very important to the Irish because what happened was some people were starving and they had no jobs and no money. And they went down to try to get on one of these coffin ships that were headed towards America, and they were turned away. And they were turned away with no food. They went into a pass and a terrible storm came. When it came, they all died. The Irish still feel this very deeply. And when you go to the Dulac Pass, you can't help but feel their loss. In fact, I'm a crybaby. You know I cried. Let's take a look. We have stopped in a mountain pass because of the obvious beauty. This is the Duloc Pass where, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, and I'm sorry. This is where the very hungry walked to try to find food, to try to find a way out, to just, for hope. This monument here, I believe, was a Celtic cross. It's worn down over the time. And if you read the monument, to commemorate the hungry poor who walked here in 1849 and walk the third world today, the hungry poor. And I sometimes think America is joining the ranks of the third world as we have so many hungry and poor. It also commemorates freedom for South Africa in 1994. And then there's a quote, and it's a quote, child. How can men feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings? Congress and the Senate, are you paying attention? I look at this, and it's talking about the hungry and the poor. And as I look at this, and I think about our country where we argue over, should we insure people? Should we give them health care? How much food stamps should we give them? Should we cut their food stamps? And I look at this, and, people die because they're hungry. And in our country, don't think people don't go hungry. They do. And all we can do is argue about how much is okay to feed them. Mahatma Gandhi would not be impressed with America today. He just wouldn't be. I don't think he'd be impressed with the world today. We are here at the Famine Monument. I met this lovely gentleman. What is your name?
Thomas Roach.
Hi, Thomas. And you were placing flowers, correct?
I was on my wife's grave, yeah.
Your wife is here?
Yes, she is, yeah.
What was her name?
Carmel. Her maiden name was Hempenstall. Our people came from Wexford, east coast of Ireland.
How long were you married?
We were married 35 years.
I'm so sorry for your loss. I lost my partner 12 years ago, and it never goes away.
It
never does. Now, you were placing flowers because you told me that people can be interred here now. This is not just historical, but that there's also a working part of this cemetery.
This is known as the old graveyard here, and just north here, right where you see there the headstones, that's possible the present interment, right?
Now, you were saying that you came up here in 1946. You're 70?
76.
Just don't believe it. I don't. I want your secrets, all of them. But you said you came up here in 1946, and that this is a very big difference nowadays.
Huge difference altogether. I would call it poor. Yeah, Ireland, in those days, immigration was huge. Right.
I was trying to tell them about the famine and how it really affected everybody here and how horrible it was, how millions died, and it leaves a scar, and then the country to recover, it took so long to recover.
It did take so long to recover, right? And I'll tell you what, there was mass immigration out of here, as you know, during the famine days across to your country in America there, across to Britain and all.
Well, you went to San Francisco, which is where a lot of Irish went.
Actually, I was in the Merchant Navy for a long time, the British Merchant Navy, and that's how I got to San Francisco.
Really?
Yeah.
What a life! The British Merchant Navy, and now you're here. You live here.
I live in the village here. Yeah.
What do you do? I mean,
I'm retired now.
It's kind of sedate. Do you just,
Well, I live in the landscape, live with nature and all that, and you have to move on. When you move on in years, you have to move on in that respect too.
Well, it's probably how you've stayed so physically fit for such a.
Indeed.
In our country, 70-year-olds are in hover rounds. They're being wheeled about. I want an Irish family to adopt me. I want to be Irish. I have been there so many times. The people have made me feel so warm and so loved. They are a socialist country, even though they don't know it. They are more liberal than any people in the United States that I can think of. They are very passionate about themselves, their government, and their homeland. They like to have fun in a pub, but at the same time, when you're in that pub, every single one of them will be able to talk politics with you. They know what's going on. Ireland is an incredible place to visit. You can't see it all in one time. I recommend you go many, many times and learn many, many things. Some things that we could change in our country. Sláinte.